It's similar to like you can't opt out of the global economy. You know, you can, but like most people can't. And so very similarly, you can't really opt out of what's happening right now with AI.
Today, we continue our discussion on AI technology as I share my recent conversation that I had with Mackenzie Burnett of Ambrook. Topics that we'll cover are things like how it can be used, for example, to start the ball rolling on things like estate planning or enterprise analysis or business negotiations. But then we also head down a line of questions about things like the morality of AI technology and is it safe?
If the belief is that this is inevitable, that AGI is inevitable, we want it to be developed in an open and safe way.
But AI is not a silver bullet, and while it may serve as a great assistant for some tasks in ranching, human intervention in many things are still going to be required.
I think the biggest takeaway I would want to leave everyone is that AI is here. It is real. It will increasingly impact your life, and it is affecting every business in America and across the world.
So what do we do about it? I think first we try to understand it on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. This is the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills, your host, and we're glad to have you joining us on our program today. Today we have a lot to cover. It'll be part 2 as we wrap up our conversation talking with Mackenzie Burnett about AI technology in ranching, and I'll get to that in just a few moments. But before we jump into that, I did want to mention a couple things. Number one is if there is a topic that you're thinking about or wondering about, you would like us to do a little bit more of an in-depth conversation with somebody about that, please let me know. Send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. We'll be glad to look at that, see if that's something we want to do here on the program. Or if you have questions, maybe a guest you would like us to bring back to answer some questions about a topic that we've had, we'll gladly look at doing that as well. Now, a couple things for today's show. Of course, meteorologist Don Day will be in later on talking about our long-range weather, and with that, giving us an idea of how the month of April is going to start out and maybe look for us across the country, so be sure to tune in for that. And also, a special interview here today. We're going to be talking with the guys from TechMix as a product that they've got on the market, especially for those folks taking in and receiving calves. Now, I know the spring of the year is when a lot of these calves are being born, but at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of cattle going to be moving across the country when we see these yearlings heading to grass. But so I think you'll enjoy that conversation that we have with Nathan Uphoff and Ryan Profit with TechMix, so stick around for that later on in our program here today. Now, jumping into our subject that we're going to be covering for part 2 here today, and that is going to be in using AI technology in ranching. And I want to clarify, I didn't do probably a great job last week as we talked about that, and even in the show title, thinking that it was going to be, maybe if you saw the show title, thinking it was going to be this broad spectrum look at AI technology in ranching. And more specifically, if you were able to listen to last week's show, and if you didn't, I would encourage you to go back and do that. You can find it at workingranchradio.com or any podcast provider out there. It would be very important to go back and listen to last week's show as a precursor to this week's show to kind of give you a little bit more idea of what we're going to be talking about and continuing to talk about here today. But I know if folks were listening that are in the tech business and in precision agriculture that do focus on ranching, you realize that those are some of the things that we're seeing today, whether it's collars in cattle, whether it's ear tags, or various different things. Maybe it's even the mechanisms that happen in feedlots or in dairies or various things like that. Specifically, more what we're kind of getting into in our conversation is more about probably the AI technology that we're hearing more about with the chat bots, for example, ChatGPT, and those kinds of things that can be used. And that's kind of the focus that we have really been looking at. The guest that we have, and we're going to jump into our conversation here in just a moment, is Mackenzie Burnett. Now, Mackenzie Burnett is also the CEO and the co-founder of Ambrook, and we've talked with her in previous shows about Ambrook, but today and last week was really dialing in on what she understands and what she knows, because she's definitely of a generation that has been around it and is using it in their own business, but also in the also has a feel for the agriculture industry as well, and knowing kind of where ranchers are at and where this could be used as well. So let's jump back into our conversation here today. Again, my guest is Mackenzie Burnett. She is the CEO and co-founder of Ambrook, but we're talking about the use of AI technology, and probably more specifically like the chatbot type of AI technology in ranching. Let's jump back into that conversation now. Something else, Mackenzie, I was thinking about too, is because as you had said earlier, that it was a lot of it is built on pattern recognition and looking at that, pulling that data all together in just a very, very quick time that normally, as we were saying before, would take hours and hours upon research, can do it in 45 seconds. So with that in mind, where do you see it going in terms of modeling and predicting various things? Because we as ranchers, there's what we would say there's unknowns in our industry, one of them being weather. Markets, I wouldn't say completely an unknown, but there's some risk. It's definitely subjective to things. So when we start looking at, as ranchers using it, where do you see it in terms of as it goes? And again, it's going to get better and better as years go by, in terms of being something where I can run a scenario, I can run an enterprise analysis on a potential idea for an enterprise, like, hey, I want to run haired sheep in northeastern Wyoming, or I want to run ostriches. I know how that'll come back, but I can run these models, and in like seconds, I've got an enterprise analysis on something that I would have, again, much like I said earlier with the business venture, would have taken a long time. So as things go, its ability to do these models and predicting, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think this is actually a good time to kind of talk about limitations of AI. I actually don't think that like weather is necessarily a place where it would be super limited, but I think it is important when we're talking about numbers or some of the other things, is that there are still, AI can hallucinate. So the term hallucination, is basically describes when like AI gets you back an answer, you're like,
yeah,
I don't think those numbers are right, or like,
you need to hit the thumbs really down on that response.
Yeah, exactly. And that the reason why that is because so it's doing all this pattern recognition, but you can kind of think of what it's done is it's basically treated the internet like a giant soup.
Okay.
And like sometimes it kind of gets the relationships between one part of the soup and another part of the soup kind of mixed up. And so that's sort of where hallucinations happen. Right. So that's one piece. And that's a big part of it, is just like increasing sort of the accuracy of that. And so that's also another reason why human interpretation will almost always still be important, unless, for example, they figure out how to solve the hallucination problem, right? Which would be like a multi-billion-dollar company to figure that out. Obviously, never say never. And so that is sort of a big limitation. I think the other limitation is that these models are still really, well, except, DeepSeek is kind of getting us there where the models don't have to be that big, right? But I think in the next couple of years, all of these companies are working on like models that can fit on your phone, sort of like local models, basically, that can also work offline. So right now, a lot of these models kind of they don't all need a live internet connection, but they work well with a live internet connection. And I think, increasingly you're going to want to see things that are going to be on device. And so it's, there are examples of that. A lot of phones now are having like on device elements of that, but I think that's going to get a lot better in the next couple of years. But that is kind of still a limitation now. It's just for most of the models that Americans are using, the models are very large and compute intensive. And so, that will limit limit the ability to use them. Okay. So now getting to weather prediction, or thinking about just anything that is highly variable or like hard to predict, like how to do that. I think weather prediction is, I think obviously an area in which a lot of there's being a lot of money thrown at that. But I think also we've had weather channels for a very long time, right? And those weren't run sort of on with AI, and like they were fine, not like 3 months in advance, but like the next couple of days, like pretty reliable. And so I think you're just going to see that window probably increase, right? Where like you're going to be able to like understand cycles of drought patterns and other things that might otherwise be harder.
Mm-hmm. And I would say so too. I have had a similar conversation with meteorologist Don Day about that, but just as you said, in all of this.
Oh, actually, one thing, Justin, I thought about that might actually be really interesting with weather is like hyperlocal, like microclimates. And I think that's actually more because there's been no incentive historically for the Weather Channel to tell you like what your like little plot of land, that the microclimate of, but it's it's not, they're not going to have big models and somebody out there telling you what like that particular field and how that field is going to do for the next couple of days.
Reporting from the south side of X-Ring Ranch in Wyoming.
Yeah, exactly. But actually you could have AI do that. Like, I think that's actually a really good example of where like you can have hyper local forecasting in ways that might be really interesting.
Let's pause here and take a break. And when we come back, we continue on in our conversation talking about AI technology and ranching, but really not specifically the technology itself, other than what are people talking about? What are they feeling about AI technology, and can it be trusted? That's the discussion coming up after the break. This segment today brought to you by the American Gelbvieh Association.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer genetics.
As we continue on talking about AI technology in ranching, I encourage you, again, as I said in the last segment, to go back and listen to last week's show. I think that will also help in understanding some of the things that we're talking about here today, and as we continue to move forward in that. It was just a few months ago when I crossed paths with Mackenzie Burnett, who's the CEO and co-founder of Ambra, because I had her on the show as we were talking about her company, yet at the same time I also realized she had a very fundamental and very working knowledge of AI, using AI in her own business, but also a working knowledge of understanding agriculture and what they're doing. And I thought if we could bring those two together would help us to understand it as well. So let's jump back into our conversation with Mackenzie Burnett as we continue exploring and looking at AI technology in ranching. Looking at some of the other discussions that come up with this, and it kind of coincides. I'd written some notes down as you were talking before, because one of the things, it's pulling a lot of the data that's out there. And as we know, even now, I mean, I can go into my county page here and find more of the records from years ago, digitized, those kinds of things being done. And of course, anything today is automatically digitized. And as time goes, history also builds. So we have more of that data continuing to build. And so some of the conversations that I hear, especially with folks that, first of all, number one, the average age of the American farmer rancher is probably in the middle to late 50s, maybe upwards of 60 years old, just a bit less than that, or used to be. And so you take that demographic, then into the fact that we are also people that kind of not the first ones to just automatically trust technology. So if you take those two demographics and put them together, I think for some folks, there's some little kind of concern with AI, even to the point of spirituality of it, to just the trusting of it, and my data, our data, the data, all those kinds of things. So can we trust it? Is that a deep question though? Or is that is that a very broad question?
I think it's a good question. I think I have we have this term on our team called strange math, which is that when we have like multiple feelings at the same time about something. I like that term a lot because I learned about it in a leadership course, and I like it because it's a term that I can use to kind of say like I feel both positively and negatively about something. Like I have mixed feelings about it, but they don't really cancel each other out. And so I think the ways in which I don't trust it is like it's being built by giant corporations. And I think there's also even a lot of critique of OpenAI where it's kind of ironic. The irony of OpenAI, the open part, is like it's increasingly moving from like a nonprofit, into a very very deliberately for-profit business. And yet at the same time, it's just I've just seen how it's like enabled me to be like so much better at my job and like deeper thinker, and like enabled my team to, to do their jobs in ways that offload a lot of really tedious work. And so I think from a sense of, this is where actually like societal norms and rules are really important, and being able to have like a community conversation around it and not just be like pulled into an inevitable future that's defined by like an Elon Musk or something, I think is really, really important. And I hope that America can have a conversation about it at a bigger level, because it's I think the reality is it will come. It is here.
Yeah.
It's similar to like, you can't opt out of the global economy. You can live in the woods somewhere, but like most people can't. And so very similarly, you can't really opt out of what's happening right now with AI. And that is really scary. And so I personally have like grappled, like the conversations I have with like friends, like we all talk about this, which is like, what is the future that we're being pulled toward? And I think it's a very normal reaction to be like, this feels like a lot,
yeah.
And I'm like, can I like sign up for this or not? So I think, and, maybe this whole conversation, you're kind of hearing me go back and forth between like, the reason why I talked about this idea of AI native ranches is like, I think you will start to see them. I think it is inevitable, but it's not going to be so drastic that it suddenly like every neighbor of yours is going to be an AI native ranch tomorrow, and probably not even in 5 years or 10 years, but it's sort of just like, that is where we're going. And I keep on saying AI native ranch, AI native businesses, basically. We also face this, as a startup. And so like what I have thought a lot about, like, what does that future look like? And how do I want to have agency in that future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know. Do you trust it?
Well, so I guess I look at it this way. I appreciate the question back, because I guess where I look at it is similarly to how you said. I'm concerned with how far it's going to go. I definitely see the relevance to some things I'm able to use it for and to be more productive. And I think those tools are there, and that is not a moral issue. That is just me trying to be as efficient as I can. And yet down the road, we could be faced with things that maybe challenge people's morality or things like that start getting into where they're at spiritually, where they're at mentally, and where they're at with everything. Does that make sense? I think that's
totally.
where some people struggle a little bit too. Because all we can think about is, RoboCop or all the movies that were done years ago, and we've got machines running the world. How many times have you heard that, if they aren't already?
Totally. Well, I think that was the original premise behind why everyone was cheering on OpenAI in the beginning, which is this idea that we don't want this to be developed by like China,
Mm-hmm.
We want this to be developed in an open, if the belief is that this is inevitable, that AGI is inevitable, we want it to be developed in an open and safe way. And there's a whole community of really smart people with all they care about is what AI safety is kind of the term.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the idea that like, what if we accidentally develop a really malevolent
mm-hmm.
machine that, I don't know, there's a famous kind of thought experiment called the paperclip maximizer. And it basically, it's trying to illustrate the potential dangers of AI by basically what happens if you task an AI with, you have a paperclip factory and you say, AI, run this paperclip factory. Like, I just want you to produce as many paperclips as possible. And you kind of go away for a while. And then you come back and you're like, oh, like this paperclip factory seems to have taken over the whole town because AI has basically decided like the best way to like maximize paperclip production is to turn every human in that town into a paperclip manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And then you go back for a little bit and you're like, oh, actually this AI has decided that the best way to like maximize paperclips is to get rid of the entire human population and just only create paperclip factories everywhere, because that is the way to, and I think that's a thought experiment that I think does a really good job of illustrating like what happens when, you keep on going down this. And there are some people who believe that like we need to avoid that future at all costs, because it is even if it's a very small possibility that happens, that is so bad that we should put a ton of resources toward making that eliminating as much as possible that possibility for the future. And so I think that when folks feel, when are grappling on these questions, it's super normal and it's like absolutely the right questions to be grappling with.
We're going to pause here and return after the break. And in the finality of our conversation with Mackenzie, we get into some continued questions about other things like concerns and safety of data and whether or not we as ranchers should be using it or how it should be used. just a lot of the things that I think for a lot of us, we're probably just wondering. We're going to get into those when we return. This segment today brought to you by Vigortone Minerals.
Support your cattle's health and productivity with Vigortone Minerals. Since 1912, Vigortone has been a trusted name in animal nutrition. Our revitalized product line offers targeted nutrition for every stage of production and every region. Vigortone delivers consistent performance and simplifies your mineral decisions. Wherever you are, Vigortone works. Visit Vigortone.com to learn more.
So, do you think we as ranchers, and then I know this is a question that I know where the answer is going to go, but do you think we as ranchers need to be using it, and where and how?
Okay, well, I will start with I am not a rancher. I'm an aspiring rancher.
I know you are, but I appreciate you prefacing your answer to that. But and I ask you that because not knowing that, I know that. Mm-hmm. I know that you're not a rancher, but I'm not a software developer.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm asking you because you see its potential and its uses.
Yeah,
you
totally.
also understand enough of ranching. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Your answer to that question.
Okay. So with that caveat, I think that it would make a lot of ranchers' lives a lot easier if they felt prepared going into conversations with their lenders because they understand what questions to ask. If they had a neutral third party, to kind of mediate hard family conversations, if they're able to write a business plan for, a new business and kind of know how to get that started. Like, I think, so my answer is yes. Like, I think it would be, it has the potential to make so many people's lives a lot easier. And I think if any of your listeners is interested in like, well, how do I go from, zero to building an AI native ranch? The best way like to dip your toes in is to start using these like chatbots in your everyday life, and you'll just get ideas. And so then when the next thing comes, maybe you're a lot more comfortable with understanding how to use, something like Vents or something. If a virtual fencing company rolls out an AI feature that automatically moves that, maybe you're more likely to be a beta tester of that because you're kind of comfortable with knowing, how a lot of that will work. And I think that is something that I've seen in our team. Like our team uses some AI tools now, using as much, much more likely to use more in their everyday workflows because they're just used to it. It's kind of a habit that they build.
Another question here, and again, it's kind of a little bit back to what we previously talked about a little bit on some of the concerns, but the data. Everybody in ranching and business. I'm not going to throw ranchers under the bus in this. I'm going to say people in business, they're concerned about their data and the safety of their data. Aren't we playing into this and opening up ourselves to data mining?
Yeah. So I think that there's, this is where it's really important to draw the line between like publicly available data and like private or proprietary data. And I actually think this is where proprietary data becomes way more valuable. Whenever you use tools, like make sure that you understand the terms of service of like giving your data to those tools. So like, for example, for us, like we have pretty strict terms of service where Ambrick is not allowed to sell your data, but folks can opt in to like aggregated and anonymized uses of it for like benchmarking is a good example of that, right? Like we want to be able to have like our community be able to like learn from each other, but only if it can be anonymized and aggregated, which means that you can't tie back data to any individual user. And like our community members like opt into that, right? And so I think there's been a conversation for a long time that a lot of producers know that their data is valuable, but they haven't really been able to sell it, if that makes sense. Like they haven't been able to get as much value from them. They just know it's valuable. And I think that this actually changes the game where actually your data is quite valuable because, being able to run, because you have these foundational models that are built on the public data, but then all the fine tuning can happen on the proprietary data sets. Yeah. So I think it is like, know what you're signing up for. There are some things that are just, when you use Facebook, you just like by signing up and creating an account with Facebook, you are giving, people should know you're giving all the rights to your data to Facebook, same with honestly, most tools that you use. So I think that's something where it's like, I'm not trying to make it that seem scary, but it is a truth, that happens.
Yeah, it is, and I've heard in the conversation a lot of times, and it's not just about AI technology, it's about any technology. I mean, the big discussion in ranching right now is EID tags, and there's a concern there in terms of who's holding that data, the mandatory versus voluntary, all those kinds of things. I get it. I understand all sides of that. I know where we're at on that. And just in general, I think there's just a concern of data and how that's going to be used either for, and I think people don't think about that as much as they do about the against, So as we kind of wind down here, just some final comments from you in regard to our conversation here today. It really was just the premises of it was AI in ranching. But just as we kind of wind our conversation down, just some final comments from you regarding AI in ranching.
Yeah, totally. So we covered a lot. We talked about the history of like sort of why is it kind of coming out of the woodwork now. And then we talked about all these different use cases for ranchers and like, what does it mean to be competitive in the age of AI? I think the biggest takeaway to like, I would want to leave everyone is that AI is here. It is real. It will increasingly impact your life, and it is affecting every business in America and across the world. And not just ranches. And so thinking about like AI and ranching is sort of thinking about it, really interesting use cases for ranching in particular, but also just given that reality, what do you want to do about it? And I think that's where all these like morality and like, these other questions come in that are really interesting. And it's all obviously everyone's personal choice about how to engage in that reality, because it absolutely is possible to just opt out and probably be fine, for a while. And so I think that's where like we have found it, at Ambrook. I personally found it, and our team has found it really useful in building a business. And it is not a panacea for every problem, and it acts more like an assistant than it does as a full human. That's great because it means we all have jobs still, but it also means that we have to think about how do we want to build for that future.
Yeah. Two things real quick that you talked about too, and that is, well, one specifically, this is not going to replace the physical elements that we have to do, whether it's in the office or whether it's out on the ranch. Because I can tell you right now, AI is not going to build a fence. It's not going to open a gate. It's not going to calve a cow. It's not going to pull a lamb. Those kinds of things. And so it's not there's not a replacement of humans is, I think, a really fundamental thing to understand. It's as you said, it's a pretty good sidekick.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the only way that it would start to replace humans is if there were repeatable enough tasks that an AI robot can do, but that's pretty far away right now. Yeah. So people are working on it for sure, but it's still in a lot of like very expensive concept land mostly. So I think with that caveat, then like absolutely yes, and in fact but what it's making is a lot of physical jobs a lot safer actually in the economy than quote unquote knowledge work, which is basically any services or things that you can do with your computer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we all know in ranching, there's very little we do that's identically repetitive. Yeah, we can say we calve 350 head of cows, but I can guarantee you none of them calve the same way every time.
Yeah.
But Mackenzie, is there anything we left out? I sure appreciate you taking the time. And I again, like I said, yes, I know you're not a full-blown rancher. I get it. But I didn't want to talk to. Yeah. I did not want to talk to a full-blown rancher. I wanted to talk to somebody up to speed in the industry of what we're talking about here. And the fact is, you understand agriculture. Your Ambrook business is built with the idea of how do we help ranchers that need to know enterprise P&Ls per enterprise or P&L per place and all those kinds of things that we talked about before. So I know you understand that, and I appreciate your insight. And just, again, a final word from you before we head out.
No, I really enjoyed this conversation and the opportunity to talk about all this. And I'm just really excited, honestly, to be able to continue to have these types of conversations in the industry. I think they're just really important to have. And I think a lot of the voices that have been in this conversation have been from these big corporations in the tech sector. And it's just going to miss the mark if we don't have more perspectives. So I really appreciate you hosting it.
You bet. Well, and I know I kind of interrupt you when I said you're not in production agriculture, and you said not yet. You're going there. You're gonna do it. So, thank you for being here on the Work and Ranch Radio Show. I sure enjoyed my conversation here today.
Thanks, Justin.
Wow, what a conversation that requires that's going to need a replay or a rewind button to go back and listen to that again. I encourage you to do that. And I know it's part of this is kind of a deep topic in a way, but it is something that's real, and it's something as Mackenzie was saying, you can choose to opt out of it. There's no question. But every day and more in our lives, there's some element of AI technology that is being used or that is a part of our lives, whether we know it or not, probably. But with that in mind, I hope that we were able to answer some of your questions. Like I said, if you have more questions you'd like us to bring Mackenzie back on, or somebody that you also would recommend that has extensive use or understanding of AI in ranching, then please feel free to let me know on that. A big thank you to Mackenzie Burnett with Ambrook joining us here today on the program. Well, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to have the guys from TechMix joining us here today to talk about their product, for a great product for use when you're receiving those calves in and keeping those calves healthy and eating. Boy, that's important. Eating and going to water. If that's not one of the number 1 and 2 things when receiving calves, that's what it's all about. So we're going to talk about it when we come back. This segment today brought to you by the North American Limousine Foundation.
With rising feed costs and an increased focus on sustainability within the beef industry, feed efficiency is more than a buzzword. It's rapidly becoming a battle cry in an industry challenged to do more with less. By incorporating today's Limousine and Limflex genetics into your planned crossbreeding program, you can capitalize on the breed's inherent feed efficiency advantage and moderate cow size, while still banking the premiums paid for high-quality, high-yielding carcasses. That's 2 ways to profit instead of 1. Let Limousine and Limflex deliver dollars to your bottom line. Limousine today, profit tomorrow.
A couple months ago, I had the opportunity to attend the cattle convention down in San Antonio, Texas. Amongst all the things to learn and see and be educated with down there, also was a pretty tremendous trade show. And while there, I was able to sit down and visit with Nathan Uphaw and Ryan Profit with TechMix. Now, they have products for a lot of different products, but the one we were talking about here today was a product called Bovaline, as it's targeted specifically for receiving calves. And how do we get those calves all on the same page at the same time using a drench that they have available, and not just the same kind of old drench that maybe has been around for some time, but really designed with some specific things in mind. So from the trade show floor, let's jump into that conversation now. Joining us on our program today is Nathan Uphaw and Ryan Profit with TechMix. Thanks, guys, for joining us here on the Work and Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks for being here.
You bet. So I just come out of a seminar where I was listening to cattle facts. I mean, the last few years, the price of these calves and the cattle market is really great. We all enjoy it. As a cow-calf operation myself, I enjoy these higher prices as well. But it also means that with these higher prices, the value of a live calf is even more. And after they leave my place and hit into the next guy, that stocker, that backgrounder, that feeder that's going to take them on, they want to know that once it arrives at there, because they paid a lot of money for these, they want those calves living. And so when we get into that point, we know that upon receiving calves, that's a critical time, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it is, and that's where we set our standards high at TechMix. We're a hydration company, and those cattle that are transported, they need hydration. They're athletes, just like basketball and football players. They need hydration as well. They've been commingled. They've been stressed, on the road, however many hours it takes to get to the background or the feed yard. So these cattle need hydration as soon as they get off the truck. Yes, sir.
So when we look at this, there's definitely a lot of products in our market that sort of addresses this. But I know, Nathan, in talking with you, one of the things as you began to formulate the product was something that targeted more than just one aspect of this. We were looking at a lot of things. As you said, as you were saying, Ryan, I mean, these cattle are dried out, they're needing hydration, but there's other things going into that. And Nathan explained kind of what the focus was in this process of coming up with a product that addressed more than just one issue.
Yep. No, that's a good point. And Ryan was instrumental in the development of this product. He brought it to us early, about 3 years ago, and said, hey, my producers are out here like you said, cattle prices are going up. These things are getting more valuable, but they've got more needs that they need to have addressed, right? It's not just about gut health or a probiotic or a trace mineral. They have a multitude of problems, and we have to give them something that's going to help address whatever that might be, right? A group of 4-weight cutting bulls out of the Southeast might have a different need than, some cattle just going across state lines in the Midwest. And how do we develop a product that is broad-based but also highly effective, right? Yeah. And so that's where we were able to incorporate a lot of different avenues, not only from an electrolyte platform, but maternally derived bioactives, prebiotics, and trace minerals, all in a very unique combination that we refer to as a nutrient-dense liquid to deliver a really concentrated dose of these things at a period in that animal's life when it really needs it.
Now, you said nutrient-dense liquid. Expand on that a little bit more, because that's kind of key to part of this whole deal in this, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the things that we do at TechMix is make nutrient-dense liquids. So it's a unique process. Actually, so our nutrient-dense liquids by definition are 60% solids or greater by weight. So a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. A gallon of our product will weigh significantly more than that. And it just allows us to fold in and incorporate so much more nutrition in a very concentrated dose than just, you can go into the cupboard and mixing up Kool-Aid or something, that kind of thing.
Well, and I think as we were talking before, the nutrient-dense aspect is that, it's the product that's going in as a drench product is all of it's useful versus a lot of it watered down that we could see with other products. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ryan, I'm going to go back to you because I know as a sales, you're a sales manager, and with that, and I know you're out in the field quite a bit seeing this, and so, just kind of your experience in dealing with guys. I know you brought this product to them, but at the same time, what are you seeing?
So what we're seeing is these cattle are on feed and on water a lot quicker than these cattle just head down, not going to the feed bunks, not going to the water tanks eating. That's what we're seeing, number one. And if we use this product on arrival, these cattle are back on feed and water quicker. So we are seeing a little bit of a heavier weight gain on those cattle because they got to the bunk quicker instead of going over there and laying down. And then we also are seeing, less treats, less if we're using this on arrival, we're seeing less treats, we're having less pulls. You don't have to go out and darting a bunch of cattle. These cattle are up and on feed and on water a lot quicker, so they're starting healthier as soon as they get off the truck.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think that's one of the things we were talking about. It's good because it's the well-being of that calf and getting them up and going. You want them healthy, you want them eating and doing that. But I think from a profitability standpoint, as a stock or feeder, you also want to get this group of calves, that pen of calves, all kind of working at the same time, rather than, we got a little, 3 or 4 heads sick over here, and this, they're kind of, ears are drooping a little bit, and whereas we can get that all done at the same time.
That's right.
Get them on the level playing field.
And I think that's one of the perks with having a drench application of this product is, everybody got it, right? If we're putting something in the feed, you've been there, right? Some animals come to the bunk hard, some don't at all. How do you get everything into them? How do you know that they got it? And having that drench application for this product, it's ensuring that delivery and getting those cattle started off right is just profoundly important.
Yeah, you bet. So for folks who are wanting more information about just kind of what it is and how they can get more information about it, what would they need to do?
Sure. So all of our products go through animal health distribution. So reach out to your local vet clinic, your local veterinarian. Reach out to your animal health distribution partners. We work with everyone, so you can get our products through anywhere. You can go to our website techmixglobal.com and find all of our products there as well.
And we referred to it a few times, but it is a drench, so it's something, as you said, upon arrival, get it in these, and we know if we can get that done, then that's going to be the easiest time to do that, isn't it?
That is right. And this product is called Bovaline, and it's a 2-ounce dosage rate on these cattle.
Yep.
So from the smallest to the big, it's the same. So it'd be 60 mLs, and it's very easy to use. We've used it in all climates when we have tested and trialed it. Syringeability is amazing on it. You're not gonna have a sore hand by the end of the shoot when you're done by the day. So, and we all like that. So syringeability, you don't have to worry about that. Cold climate, hot weather, we're good.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, again, the website for more information before we go here.
It'll be TechMix, TechMix,
Guys, anything else before we go?
I guess the only other thing I would add to that is it's not a scripted product, right? So you can use it, you can get it however you need it, and it's just haven't seen this product right from its inception on a bench top all the way through putting it in animals. It's blown us away as far as what we've seen, and truly having that ability to alter the lives, alter the profitability of the cattlemen. It's exceeded all of our expectations, in terms of reducing mortality, and I think that's absolutely huge and critical given the economic climate we're in right now.
Well, and I think that's what it's about. We're not out there to do things just to add another input cost. There's a reason for it, and I think that comes down to it.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us here on the program.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You bet. And again, that was Ryan Profit and Nathan Uphaw with TechMix as we were talking there on the trade show floor of this past winter's cattle convention that took place in San Antonio, Texas. Now, if you want to find out more about the product that we were talking about, Bovaline, again, that website is techmixglobal.com. Well, stay with us. Don Day's long-range weather forecast coming up next.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
And as we turn now and take a look at our long-range weather today, brought to you by Long Range Dewormer. Out on the range, success is going to start with good, healthy, thriving cattle. And Long Range Epinephrine extended-release dewormer delivers up to 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose. That helps your herd graze and gain weight without extra parasite pressure. In a study, yearlings treated with Long Range gained 23 more pounds per head compared to those treated with generic ivermectin. Bigger gains and stronger returns on sale day start with Long Range. Learn more at longrangedewormer.com. Now remember, don't treat within 48 hours of slaughter. Not for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older. Pregnant women should wear gloves and exercise caution or avoid handling this product. Well, as we turn now and take a look at our long-range weather, joining us as he does each and every week is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, good to have you back here again this week on our program.
Good to be here.
All right, so we are approaching yet the end of another month, and it is hard to believe we're just continuing to move through the year. We're already into now the first week here of spring, and with that in mind, I know in looking and watching some of your weather reports, it's been pretty decent weather. I mean, we've definitely had a few little winter storms that's went through, but they've been pretty quick movers for the most part. Right now, there's kind of a low sitting out there. Looks like in this coming week, the western half of the country is going to be pretty warm above normal temperatures. But there's a low sitting off the coast that we're not quite sure what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, there's sort of an adjustment in the weather pattern going on right now. After about 3 weeks of 2 storms a week going across the U.S., and as you mentioned, very quickly, but impactful with some winter storms in parts of the plains and then a lot of severe weather in the south and the central part of the U.S. A lot of the United States kind of enjoying right now a break. And this is going to go on for about 5 or 6 days. Part of that break is because there's a big low forming out in the eastern Pacific, which is going to help build a big high-pressure system out ahead of it. And that's going to cover a lot of the central and western United States, bringing everybody. I will guarantee there will be an outbreak of spring fever. There will be a lot of spring fever going on with those warmer temperatures. But that low off the California coast and the Pacific Northwest coast is large and will likely start to move in, first of all, in pieces, then maybe a larger part of that storm right into the first week of April. So that is likely going to start the next storm cycle. So there's sort of we'll call this halftime. And we'll go into the third and fourth quarter of this busy weather season as we get into April and May.
Mm-hmm. So what are you anticipating with April? You did say that we are starting to see really, truly that shift in our weather patterns, definitely more that spring, early type of weather that can happen. But with that in mind, do you see April I realize it's typically could be a month that has a lot of variabilities, but any more than above average with the type of weather or stormy weather that we would see?
I think, to your point, April is can be a very wild month with a lot of ups and downs, and I think this month won't disappoint. I think April is going to be that, and maybe more variability this month of April than maybe that we've seen over the last couple of spring seasons, at least back in 24. I think this one's going to be a lot more busy, and the reason I say that is that we continue to see the La Nina fade to a neutral status out in the Pacific. We also have a fair amount of cold air up in those higher latitudes still. And what you tend to get this time of year, if patterns are right, is you'll get these big pushes of warm air ahead of these Pacific storms. At the same time, cold air comes in on the backside of it. And that's really what we saw here in the past week. We had parts of the eastern Corn Belt and Midwest have 70, 80 degree temperature, severe thunderstorms, and then snow. And I think April is going to do the same thing. So April can be a very cruel month with its wild swings, and I'm expecting that's exactly how the month of April will go, and really for just about everybody.
Okay.
But I certainly think the northern plains, which could really use some moisture, like North Dakota, parts of South Dakota, eastern Montana, they'll get back into the storm track, I think, in the month of April. So there's a little bit of help on the way there. One area I'm concerned about, Justin, is the southern plains, Texas, eastern New Mexico, southern Colorado seems to be missing out on this weather. And I think at least for the start of April, that's how it's going to go as well.
Mm-hmm. I know last week you kind of shared with your listeners through your podcast where the snowpack levels were. Of course, when we talk snowpack levels, it's pretty much looking for, I know for folks that are in the east part of the country, maybe it's not something you guys watch so much, but for those in the western half of the United States, we are looking at those snowpack levels up in the mountains. And for the most part, everything was fairly decent, but that Four Corners country is still kind of tough. And does it look like potentially there could be a storm that's going to cross that path that would help that snowpack in those areas?
Well, I think there's a chance for maybe one more surge of moisture down there in the southwestern United States. The last few weeks has brought a late season surge of moisture to parts of Arizona, southern Utah, and northern New Mexico, but they need more. So I think there's going to be a chance, maybe one chance in April, one chance in early May. But I think the bias of the better snow conditions in the mountains will again be more north. If you look at snowpack conditions along Interstate 70, Interstate 80, Interstate 90, they're doing well. And the snowpack in Northern California and Oregon and Idaho is doing really, really well. But those southern areas are still going to end up well below average, I'm afraid.
Okay. So with that, let's kind of move on to one more thing before we leave here today, because we are approaching the end of March. And the only reason I say that is because March is kind of the rain. And I didn't know about this till I listened to your show. And it's the rain gauge rally. So explain what that's all about.
Well, you and I have talked about this volunteer rain gauge network before, and it's an acronym called COCORAS, which is basically it's a community of cooperative observers who are willing to measure rain and snowfall across the United States. It's been going on for more than a couple of decades. And what's really important, especially for rural listeners here, is that these rain gauge and snow reports are really critical in helping to evaluate whether or not we're in a drought or not, or how severe it is. A lot of decisions are made with stocking and insurance in terms of what precipitation levels are. And we've got parts of the country where you'll have 20, 50 miles or more between rain gauge reports. So the idea of this project is to fill in those gaps. This makes for a better drought monitor. This makes for a better assessment of things. It's a volunteer network. You get a rain gauge and you go out and you measure the rain and when you get snow, and then you report it electronically. And one benefit of this program is you can go into the database that you send your information to and create maps and see what the precipitation patterns are. And it's going to be different than what you're going to get from the National Weather Service or other sources, because it's going to be for rural locations that aren't at an airport. They're not where the usual reports come from. So this is critical that we get as many volunteers as possible. And during the month of March, They're calling it the Rain Gauge Rally across the United States to see which state can get the most people to sign up and volunteer.
Mm-hmm. And I know, as I saw on your show, Minnesota was leading like way far ahead. The state of Minnesota was. So all these other states, we need to kind of kick it up a little bit and get some more pulled in there. We can't let Minnesota win this deal.
Well, there's two ways to win this for a state. One is just the sheer number of rain gauges, but also per capita. So the more less populated states can still finish on top. Like a couple of years ago, Wyoming finished highest per capita. So if you're in a small populated state, you still have a chance to come out on top. They must be offering free beer or something in Minnesota. Yeah. I don't know what's going on, but it's fun. And it's some people always ask me, well, how can I be a part? How can I help? In terms of keeping track of the weather. And this is probably the best way. We all know that water is king, and keeping track of that is so really, really important. And the history of weather observations has always been biased to cities.
Yeah.
And it's always been biased to where there's an airport, because that's where weather stations have always been put first. Mm-hmm. So get yourself a rain gauge and sign on up. You go to cocorahs.org.
Yep. Okay. And my thing about this too is, for a lot of us in agriculture, we grew up with maybe a dad or a granddad that was always journaling and always writing down what they were doing that day, and maybe even a little bit of the weather. And that was, and that's fine. It was in their little red books. But this is something, and I've been doing it for several years. You and I have talked about it, as you were saying earlier, but this is something that will be data forever. That, if you're for your grandkids or your kids or your grandkids that would have the ranch down the road, or anybody, they're going to have that information of what the rain, what the snow was like, or what the moisture was like in different times of the year. Because as you and I have talked oftentimes, is I'll always say, okay, what does this year resemble? What previous year? And just having that data to go back and look back is going to be critical for going forward.
Well, it really is. And it also is just good to see what your neighbor's doing. And when you sign up for this, you'll find out is, oh yeah, so-and-so 10 miles up north, you start to see what he got. Mm-hmm. And that helps you as well. And so databasing it, to your point, it's going to go into a database and it's there all the time. You don't have to write it in the back of a notebook. Try to find that notebook later. Once you put that information in, and of course, there's an app for that. They've got an app. You can use your phone and put that information. You can use your phone to look at maps. I mean, after we get a big storm, like the storm here in this past week that went through Nebraska and Iowa and parts of Kansas, I wanted to see how Northwest Kansas did. I wanted to see how that winter wheat country did. That next morning after the storm, I was just watching all these volunteer reports coming in, because you know what? You got Goodland, Kansas, and then you got McCook, Nebraska. But you have no data in between unless we have volunteers, so that's what's really important. I hear a lot of complaints about the drought monitor, like, well, that doesn't really explain, I don't see that where I live. It's worse than it is, than it shows on the map. Well, the more people put that information in, the better those maps are going to be.
Yep, I agree. Well, I know we went a little bit longer than normal, but I wanted to make sure and talk about that because I think it's important. I know you've always talked about it as well. So thanks for joining us here today. Appreciate the weather update and the information about the Rain Gauge Rally. And folks, get out, get signed up, go to cocorahs.org, and you can do that. Thanks, Don, for being here today.
Thanks, Justin.
And you can catch meteorologist Don Day each and every morning if you want to know what's going on across the country for the weather outlook and what he expects it to be. You can catch him each and every morning by going to his daily video podcast. You can find the link at his website at dayweather.com. Our Long Range Weather today brought to you by Long Range Dewormer. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Next week, we're going to be talking heart disease in cattle. Yeah, we used to think it was something only for those cattle in the states that had high elevations. Not the case anymore, as we're starting to see it show up elsewhere across the country. That's coming up next week. Also be looking for the next issue of Working Ranch Magazine. If you don't have a subscription, you can get it started by going to workingranchmag.com, or you can pick up a copy at your local Tractor Supply. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.